Welcome back to Silent Conspiracy. Picture this, a temple in Karnataka, early 2000s. Incense smoke curls toward ancient deities, while devotees circle the shrine with folded hands. Among them stands a middle-aged woman in a simple cotton sari, her manner humble, her face forgettable. She strikes up conversation with another woman older, alone, wearing modest gold jewelry that suggests neither poverty nor wealth. They talk about shared struggles, absent husbands, the burden of loneliness. By the time prayers end, they've become friends. Within weeks, one of them will be dead, poisoned with cyanide, stripped of jewelry and cash. The other will move to the next temple, the next victim, the next performance of piety that ends in murder. Tonight, the story of Kempamma, the serial killer who weaponized faith, turned friendship into fatal trust, and earned the name that still chills Karnataka Cyanide Mallika. Kempamma's story doesn't begin with murder, it begins with disappointment and desperation that curdled into something far darker. Born in a small village in Karnataka's Mandya district, she married young like most women of her generation and time. Her husband worked as a bus driver, providing modest stability but little else. The marriage produced children but not happiness. Financial struggles mounted, domestic tensions escalated, and Kempamma found herself trapped in the cycle that claims millions of Indian women: too much responsibility, too little agency, and no escape from poverty's grinding pressure. But Kempamma possessed something that distinguished her from other struggling women: a calculating intelligence and complete absence of moral constraint. Where others saw hardship as fate to be endured, she saw opportunity to be exploited. Where others prayed for better fortune, she began plotting how to take it from those who had more than she did. The transformation from desperate housewife to calculating killer likely didn't happen overnight. It evolved through smaller transgressions: theft from neighbors, scams involving borrowed money never repaid, manipulation of trust for petty gains. Each successful deception reinforced a lesson. People could be exploited. Morality was negotiable, and consequences could be avoided with the right combination of charm and cunning. By the mid-2000s, Kempamma had refined her methodology into a system that was both elegant and horrifying. She identified her hunting grounds: temples, pilgrimage sites, and religious gatherings across Karnataka where women traveled alone or in small groups. These locations provided perfect cover, public enough to avoid suspicion, but anonymous enough to prevent lasting connections. Her target profile was consistent and coldly rational. She sought middle-aged women traveling alone, usually from middle-class or lower-middle-class backgrounds, not wealthy enough to have security or draw massive police attention when they disappeared, but comfortable enough to carry gold jewelry, cash, and other valuables worth stealing. Women whose absence might be noticed eventually but not immediately, giving her time to dispose of evidence and move to the next location. The approach was masterfully executed. Kempamma would position herself near her chosen victim and strike up seemingly innocent complaints about temple crowds. Questions about ritual procedures, observations about shared experiences as women navigating life alone. She presented herself as relatable, harmless, and sympathetic. Within minutes, she could establish rapport that made her target comfortable sharing personal details. The friendship would deepen quickly. Kempamma would suggest sharing meals, traveling together to the next temple, or even staying at the same lodge to save money and provide companionship. She was generous with small favors, helpful with directions, and attentive in ways that made her victims feel genuinely cared for. This wasn't random predation. It was psychological manipulation performed with professional precision. Once trust was established, Kempamma would suggest sharing food or drinks. This is where her signature method came into play: cyanide, a fast-acting poison that could be disguised in strong-tasting temple prasadam spiced tea or traditional sweets. Cyanide kills quickly, often within minutes, causing symptoms that might be mistaken for sudden cardiac arrest or seizure, especially in temple settings where medical help was unimmediately available. As her victim convulsed and died, Kempamma would strip the body of jewelry, cash, and any other valuables. She would then leave the body in isolated locations, temple restrooms, nearby forests, abandoned buildings, and disappear before anyone connected her to the deceased. The method was brutally efficient. No weapons that could be traced, no physical struggle that might attract attention, and poison that metabolized quickly, complicating forensic analysis. Between 2005 and 2007, Kempamma moved through Karnataka like a ghost, leaving a trail of bodies that authorities initially failed to connect. Each murder occurred in a different district, involved different victims with no apparent connection to each other, and appeared to casual investigation as natural death or random robbery. The victims' families filed missing person reports or accepted official explanations of sudden medical emergencies. The body count rose steadily. Conservative estimates suggest she killed at least 6 women, though some investigators believe the true number may be significantly higher. Many cases likely went unrecognized as murder, attributed instead to natural causes or accidents. Kempamma's mobility and her careful selection of victims from different social networks prevented pattern recognition that might have triggered earlier investigation. Her downfall began with a mistake born from overconfidence. In October 2007, she approached a woman at a temple in Bangalore, following her established pattern of befriending a lone traveler, but this victim had family nearby who became suspicious when she mentioned her new friend. When the woman fell violently ill after sharing food with Kempamma, her relatives rushed her to a hospital where doctors recognized cyanide poisoning symptoms and saved her life. The survivor's description of her friend and the circumstances of their meeting triggered alarm bells for investigating officers who had begun noticing patterns in unsolved cases involving middle-aged women found dead near temples. A task force was assembled to review similar cases across Karnataka, and a disturbing picture emerged: multiple deaths with similar circumstances, all involving lone women who had recently made new friends at religious sites. Kempamma was arrested in November 2007 after police tracked her movements through temple CCTV footage and witness statements. When questioned, she initially denied everything, maintaining the persona of a simple, devout woman wrongly accused. But confronted with physical evidence including cyanide found in her possession and jewelry belonging to victims discovered in her home, her denials crumbled. Her confession revealed the chilling extent of her crimes. She described each murder with disturbing detachment, explaining her targeting methodology, her poisoning techniques, and her disposal methods, as if discussing ordinary business transactions. She showed no remorse, no emotional recognition of her victims' humanity. To Kempamma, they were simply resources to be exploited, walking ATMs whose deaths meant nothing beyond the valuables they provided. The psychological profile that emerged painted a picture of a woman with sociopathic tendencies who had weaponized society's assumptions about female harmlessness. She understood that middle-aged women in temple settings appeared inherently trustworthy, that religious context discouraged suspicion, and that her gender provided protective camouflage that male predators couldn't access. The trial that followed became a media sensation. Kempamma was dubbed Cyanide Mallika by the press, a name that combined the beauty of the Mallika flower with the horror of her preferred murder weapon. Newspapers published her photograph alongside those of her victims, creating visual narratives of betrayed trust and systematic predation. The prosecution built a case on physical evidence, survivor testimony, and Kempamma's own confessions. They presented jewelry recovered from her home that belonged to victims, documented the purchase of cyanide, and established her presence at locations where murders occurred. The evidence was overwhelming, but the trial also raised uncomfortable questions about how she had operated undetected for years. Defense attorneys argued that Kempamma's actions stemmed from mental illness, poverty-driven desperation, and a society that provided no legitimate opportunities for women in her circumstances. While these arguments didn't excuse her crimes, they highlighted systemic issues that create conditions where such predators can emerge and operate. In 2009, Kempamma was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. The sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment following appeals. She remains incarcerated, serving her sentence in a Karnataka prison where she has reportedly shown no remorse and maintains that her actions were justified by her economic circumstances. The case forced examination of how serial killers exploit cultural blind spots. Temples and religious sites are built on trust spaces where strangers become pilgrims united by faith. Kempamma turned this sacred trust into a weapon, understanding that suspicion contradicts the spirit of devotion that pervades such spaces. Her crimes also highlighted vulnerabilities facing women who travel alone in India. The victims she targeted were often widows, separated women, or those traveling for religious purposes without male companions. Their independence made them targets, and their social isolation meant fewer people would immediately notice their absence. The investigation revealed systemic failures in how authorities track missing persons and identify patterns across jurisdictions. Because Kempamma operated across multiple districts, local police forces didn't recognize connections between cases. Only when a central task force reviewed evidence did the pattern become clear, a lesson that led to better information sharing protocols. The case continues to fascinate criminologists as an example of how serial killers adapt methods to their social contexts. Kempamma didn't use the violent techniques associated with male serial killers. Instead, she employed poison, historically a woman's weapon, and exploited gender stereotypes that position middle-aged women as inherently harmless. Her story also serves as a cautionary tale about the danger of misplaced trust. The victims did nothing wrong except show kindness to a stranger who seemed to need friendship. Their generosity and openness became fatal vulnerabilities when encountered by someone who viewed human connection. It's merely another tool for exploitation. What transforms desperation into murder? Can poverty and limited opportunities explain, though never excuse, why someone chooses systematic killing over other survival strategies? How many other predators exploit similar blind spots in spaces designed for trust and community? Share your thoughts on this case that challenged assumptions about female criminality in religious spaces. But remember that behind each statistic is a family that lost someone to calculated betrayal. If this exploration of Karnataka's most notorious female serial killer held your attention like this video, subscribe to Silent Conspiracy and ring the bell for more investigations into crimes that challenge our assumptions about good and evil. Next time, we'll examine another case where trust became the deadliest weaponware. The mask of normalcy hid intentions so dark they still defy comprehension. Until then, stay cautious about misplaced trust, question appearances that seem too perfect, and remember that evil doesn't always announce itself with obvious warning signs. Sometimes it arrives wearing a humble sari, carrying temple flowers, speaking the language of shared faith right up until the poison takes effect.